Here to continue our theme of Youth Power Up is our keynote speaker, Callie Barton Garcon. He is a recent 2019 DC Black Pride Leadership Award winner, a passionate thespian, a queer activist, a public health capacity building specialist. Callie serves as the Senior Program Officer with True Colors United. He is most driven by creating authentic youth collaboration, increasing rural health access, and ending LGBTQ youth homelessness. Please welcome Callie to the stage.
Hello everyone, my name is Caleb Barton Garcon. I use he, she, and they pronouns, and I'm committed to queer liberation. So just to kind of say, first of all, I want to thank the conference organizers for having me here this year. A special shout out to my auntie Trina, to folks who know Trina Scott, who does this work. She's the one who put me in and got me up here on the stage. This is my 4th year attending the Stigma conference, so I'm definitely thankful, grateful to be able to have this platform this time around. Just to tell you all a little bit about me, I'm originally from Marshall, Texas. It's a small town in East Texas. I went to Prairie View A&M University, PV, home of the Panthers. Shout out to any fellow HBCU attendees out there. I've been in the district, DC area now for about 4 years. I originally came out here for work, but I always let people know that I stay for love. My fiance is right here in the front row. I'm a member of the House and Ballroom community. I'm a member of the House of Garcon. I have been in the House and Ballroom community now for about 3 years, since I've been in DC. I'm also on the board of directors for the National AIDS Housing Coalition, and I'm a senior program officer at True Colors United. Just to put that out there, I will talk a little bit more about what True Colors United does and our focus a little bit in the future. But before we get there, I want to talk a little bit about why we're here, stigma, right? So while at Prairie View A&M University, I tested positive for HIV. I was 19 years old. It was my sophomore year, my first day of my sophomore year. I will never forget it. It was very vivid for me. I was getting ready to go to school. My sophomore year, freshman year had went really well. I received about almost a 4.0 GPA, so I was looking forward to the sophomore year, really hopeful as to what was to come. Prior to this was a while ago. I'm not going to tell my age, but it was a while ago. And so at this point in time, it took about, whenever you were getting tested for HIV, it took about a week or two for individuals to get results back. Now that's changed, and it takes about a minute or less before you actually have those results. But at this point, in the dark ages, it took some time. So I went and got tested about a week or so before school started. And on the first day of school, I'll never forget, I got a phone call from the clinic, and they told me to come into the office. And that phone call completely changed my life. Walking into that office and being told that I was now a person living with HIV, and then being kind of put with the responsibility of like whether I wanted to fight or flight at this point. I chose to fly, so I went to class. I did not deal with my HIV status for about 3 years, and stigma had a lot to do with that. It had everything to do with my diagnosis. It had everything to do with my choice not to access care for 3 years. It had everything to do with my inability to share my HIV positive status with anybody for that 3 years while I was not in care. There was a stigma of being gay that was associated with my diagnosis, with no comprehensive sexual education as I was growing up, the messaging not necessarily being catered to me as a person who has sex the way that I was going to have sex, and not necessarily knowing how to protect myself. And then there was a stigma around that I had personally around the fear of discussing my sexuality. You see, at the time of me testing positive, I still wasn't someone who was living loud and proud as a gay queer person. I was gay at the time, but now I know a little bit better. And there was a fear of talking to my partners. There was a fear of talking to my partners because of the stigma that I experienced growing up about being gay. There was no framework on how to have these conversations around sex and sexuality, HIV. So here I am having sex, very active, and not being able to talk to my partners about HIV, let alone being able to talk to my partners about what the pleasure around sex, and what that means, and if they like that one little thing that they liked. I would have never known because we didn't have those conversations. Then there was the stigma of being black in the South. HIV was very serious for us, but we didn't necessarily acknowledge the seriousness of HIV. It wasn't a conversation that we had, right? It was something that was what I hear a lot now doing housing work of, like, not in my backyard, right? So yes, HIV is a real thing, but a lot of my friends and family, we don't have that issue. We don't deal with that. And being black and gay was considered shameful. It was something that was not necessarily honored or respected, especially in my Christian upbringing. When I would go to church, and I know earlier we talked about how people receive stigma in their religious preference, in their background or whatever, and that was something that was very serious for me. Growing up hearing from the pulpit that me being gay was something that was considered a sin and something that was punishable by me being sent to hell. Those messages followed me and carried with me for a very long time and kept me from being able to access the help and the care that I needed. And then there was the stigma of being young, which I know that a lot of us may be like, what do you mean the stigma of being young? Youth, all youth is, what they say, beauty is wasted on the youth and all of these things. But I was told so many times that I was to be seen and not heard. How many of y'all heard that before? Especially if you're from the South, right? I was told so many times that, I should be quiet when older folks are talking. That older adults were older and wiser. And we're here to talk about this. This year's theme is about the youth, so I want to focus in on this. But of course, we also have the outright stigma of HIV, where I was going home one day during a school break, and my cousin told me not to sit on a dirty chair because they were afraid that the chair might have AIDS. The messaging that I received as I was growing up in the South was something that was so harmful. And at this point in time, I was already living with HIV. That person had no clue. But it's important that we begin to deconstruct these conversations. So here I am at the intersection of being young, black, queer, HIV positive, and living in the South, and not really necessarily knowing what is my clear path in order for me to find my self-autonomy, for me to humanize my experience. So that whole notion of a child is to be seen and not heard, and they're just kids, and stay in the child's place. I want to focus on that just for a second. And this is not about parenting. I'm not telling you how to parent your children. This is about policy. This is about the structures, the systems that we live in. So if you feel like a oops, ouch moment during this, just understand this is not about the way that you parent your kids. This is about the way that we view the world, the way that we view systems that we work in. So let's talk about this notion of a child's place. Okay, so I've been told that quite a bit, and I've did some exploration around what this child's place is. So a child's place has the highest rates of violence in schools, gang, and against black transgender women in this country. Most of those people who are murdered, black transgender women who are murdered, a lot of them are young, under the ages of 29. Then they have 15 million children under the ages of 18 who live below the poverty line. So that's a child's place. Then we have 4.2 million youth and young adults experiencing homelessness ages 18 to 24. Over 700,000 of those unaccompanied minors under the age of 18. Over 40% of the 4.2 million identifying as LGBTQ plus individuals, so that's a child's place. And about 1 in 4 new diagnoses of HIV each year, about an estimated 12,500 between the ages of 13 to 24. So if you ask me, a child's place is dangerous. It is a place where people are experiencing homelessness. It is a place where we are put in a place that's supposed to silence us. It's meant to silence us. And I think about this week. I received a phone call from an individual who was 21 years old, who was newly diagnosed with no clue of what to do, and really had their voice completely removed away from them. And I began to counsel them through their experience and talk to them about my experience. But thinking about that just made me result back to so much of the stigma that we have associated with a person being young, because their autonomy was completely removed just by an HIV diagnosis. They had been told so many times that people living with HIV were dirty and disgusting, and that removed the human side of HIV, which if you watch Pose this season, you heard Blanca say that the first letter of HIV stands for human, and we must not forget that. Getting off on a tangent here. So it may be time for us to all examine this child's place and understand that we may all be in this space of adults are over, child, whatever, and putting people who are younger in a corner. But the reality of it is that because this space is unsafe, a child's place is unsafe, it may be time for us all to collectively come together to figure out a way to solve these issues that we are facing. The theme this year is Youth Power Up for a Stigma-Free Future, and I'm all about youth power, but the issue is that power is energy. Energy cannot be created nor destroyed. We were all born with power until someone took it away, and then we have to be reminded of our birthright and take it back. So it's necessary youth in the room to stand up and take our power back, but it's also necessary for the adults to remember, you cannot take our power away. You cannot continue to put us in a child's place. It is a time for us all to be at the table. It's a time for us all to be able to know how to build a table. It's a time for us to all decide what is on the table, what is going into our bodies, what is feeding us sustenance. In the past, we have did this so much on a hierarchy where we rely on PhDs and we rely on age to be able to dictate who has the say-so. But no longer is that time going to allow. In order for us to have solutions that actually work, that are actually focused on equity, that are actually driving us to liberation, it is necessary for us to be all at the table, regardless of age, regardless of sexual identity, regardless of gender, regardless of creed, regardless of religion. And it is time that we do that now. And it most important, okay, it is most important that we remember that if this issue is impacting my group the most, then my voice is the most imperative to this process. I do not care about a PhD, a LCSW, a MSW, an MBA. That does not matter. If I am the one who is most impacted by this issue, homelessness, HIV, income inequality, then my voice is the most important. And we heard my auntie Marissa get up and say that it's a shame that there were no black transgender women represented on these panels. And that is a necessity, because if we look at the brunt of HIV, it is affecting black transgender women. So until we recognize the importance of having people collective power built through having people at the table deciding what goes on the table with knowledge of how to build their own table, we will not move forward. People, we have to understand equity is a necessary thing, but equity is not the goal, darlings. Equity is only the vehicle that gets us to the road of liberation. That's the goal. For everybody to have autonomy over their own lives. For people to remember that every day that they get up, that I have the power and I have the authority to make decisions over my own life. So I will no longer tolerate the inevitability of an HIV-positive diagnosis for gay, black, same-gender loving people. I will not sit back and allow black, queer youth and young adults to continue to experience homelessness at the epidemic level without support and a clear path to permanent housing. But our reality today is that stigma continues to perpetuate violence against my community, and people in high places who are completely removed from our experience are continuously allowed to create solutions for us without us, and they never work. It is time that the power be returned to the people instead of the credentials. The road to liberation is a long and tumultuous one, and it can only be achieved through equity, regardless of age, sexual orientation, gender, nationality, etc. We have to all be a part of the solution. The work I currently do is with the Department of Housing and Urban Development, which we all know the secretary of that is Ben Carson. Unfortunate. However, there are some people who work in the Department of Housing and Urban Development who are very, very passionate about this issue, and they're career federal employees, not just folks who are appointed. And the work that I do is focused on meaningful involvement of people who are most impacted. So we focus on the issue of youth homelessness. I myself, as a young person, experienced homelessness multiple times. So whenever Department of Housing and Urban Development, specifically the SNAPS office, Special Needs Assistance Programs, had this money, they brought together youth with lived experiences of homelessness. Everything ranging from foster care, child welfare, juvenile justice involvement, all different types of experiences, to be able to inform what is the way that we are best to address this solution. We are currently now in the 3rd round of these grants, and because of the success of round 1 and round 2, Congress decided to double the amount of funding that's going towards this. I'm here to tell you, I am a living testament to the fact that if we bring people who are most impacted by these issues to the table to be able to create their own solutions, then those solutions will work. We talk so much about these missing populations and hidden populations and people falling through the cracks. All of that happens because we think that we know where the cracks are when we do not. It's the people who's walked on those cracks that know exactly where the cracks are. It's the people who have navigated that system that know exactly where the people are falling through. So we need to begin to reimagine our systems in ways that are focused on equity, on ways that deconstruct the ideology of transphobia, racism, and hate, that then begin to feed into our institutions, that change our education system, that change our juvenile justice system, that change our justice system overall. That then will show up in our interpersonal dialogue when we begin to tell people, your voice matters, and I'm going to show you how your voice matters. And that becomes internalized when me as an individual, I begin to wake up every single day and remind myself, I'm a bad BITC, and I'm in charge of my life, and I have authority over my life. And until we reach that, we are never, ever going to find a true solution. So remember again that the road to liberation is through equity, and I appreciate you all. Thank you for your time today. Enjoy the conference.